2,500, no, 2,200 registered voters. Sound about right?
Yeah, but only
And we had about what's that?
Go ahead.
And we had about 900 participate in the last election, a little over 900, so about 50%.
About 50%
That'd be a good estimate.
of adult people who could vote. And just out of complete curiosity too, do people have to separately register to vote, or do they just show up to the polls with their tribal membership card?
They need to register, but only once.
Only one time? Okay. Our tribe, and again, it's one of the criticisms, we still get people to invest dollars, but it's a major criticism is you have to register to vote, and if you don't vote in 2 consecutive elections, your name gets purged from the voters list. And so out of the last 4 principal chief elections that we've had, 3 of the 4 have been contested in our court system because there's enough people who show up to the poll to vote, and then they say your name's not on this list, so you have to file a challenge ballot and this, that, and the other, that the losing candidate tends to file something to see if they can round up enough people that happened to, that it would have affected the outcome of the election. So that's a better enfranchisement scenario than what we have. All right, I want to get back to some of the things in your own laws and in the way that, at least from what I can glean from the website, looks promising for what you already have in terms of an internal tribal infrastructure to make this happen relative to other tribes. And I mentioned the individuality versus the strong unified tribal identity language in your own constitution, as well as that entire language in Article 1 that talks about this reservation of rights to the people. And the fact that you still have, and part of that's part of having a tribe that has smaller numbers, but when tribes have gone through recent constitutional amendment process, there's been several across the country in the last decade where new constitutions either get adopted wholesale or there's substantial amendments to the Constitution. More and more tribes are doing away with these annual or quarterly membership meetings where you have that embodied in your Constitution. So that's one way that you have to have people plugged in, but let's be realistic in what a single annual meeting, if that's when it takes place, actually accomplishes in terms of having people be fully engaged throughout the year. It probably is that the people who already know what's going on with the tribal government come to those annual meetings, and the people that we've talked about out here on this other end of the community can't be bothered to show up to one of those. And so I would suspect that your numbers are fairly low if it's the same thing I've seen at other tribes in terms of people actually coming to that meeting. And so there's got to be better ways or additional ways to find an audience with tribal members. The other thing that I thought was very progressive relative to other tribes was the fact that you have a provision in the Constitution for the membership to be represented by an attorney. And I couldn't tell in the Constitution how that process actually plays out, but the fact that you have a mechanism in the Constitution where the people themselves could have an attorney against the government adds into this laundry list of getting inside of the head of your tribal member and what they think the government should be vis-a-vis them and their powers. That speaks volumes that you have that kind of power in there. Yeah.
I think that provision in particular and some of the others are great ideas, but the problem that we've seen, or the reality that we've seen, is that has never happened, because we never have a quorum
Right.
at the membership meeting.
And then a couple of other things, and the quorum issue are going to defeat most opportunities to do this too, but relative to other tribes, in addition to the long laundry list of Bill of Rights, so to speak, individual rights for tribal members, you also have, at least on paper, a very progressive recall initiative and referendum process. But again, if you're like a lot of tribes with a quorum mechanism, it's very difficult to get that through the process. And again, I'm reading the Constitution blind. I haven't read your cases or know how that has actually played out. But if we're talking about how to engage tribal people and how to engage your citizenry, at least on paper, you are already so much further advanced infrastructure-wise with what other tribes have in the books. And at least that all of those things are in there suggests to me that your people think about government in a little bit different way. So it might be easier for you to accomplish some of the outreach goals relative to what I've seen other tribes try to do. If this constitution is representative of what the people actually want. And I know, I again don't know the history of how the Constitution was adopted, but oftentimes, just like we did back in the 1930s with the Indian Reorganization Act and others, a lot of tribal citizens will not have ever even looked at the thing, don't know that they have these powers, don't care that they have these powers if they're still on this spectrum of just looking at the tribe not as a government, something that they participate in, but something more as a benefits delivery mechanism. All right, next question, and this is an open-ended question, is shifting us over to, okay, the infrastructure is there, and we talked about the pros and cons of having people engaged, but then it begs the question of, well, whose job is that? And so I pose the question for a little bit of a discussion with you all, and that's the question, should tribal officials play a role at all in community engagement, or is the very fact that we call it community engagement mean that you're stepping on their toes by trying to make them be more engaged? Or is there a way that tribal officials can nudge that process to happen without being overbearing to that process themselves? And so just so I know where we're coming from in the room and how far we would have to go if your grant objectives were ever coming to fruition, what do you all think about this? Should it be the role of tribal officials or tribal employees to push community engagement or not?
I think they should.
We could turn the videotape off if people want to talk freely.
Just to let you know what the video is, we're going to be editing it out. Okay, any of the audience participation. This is just to be used for future leadership and future council because it's part of the A&A grant. We need to make sure that we can self-sustain what we go through for new council members, new leadership. And so we will be drastically editing a lot of this. So feel free to participate. If you want to shut it off, we can for audience participation. Wendy is just videotaping it so that we can duplicate this training for future council members because Stacy may not be coming out every 2 years.
I don't know, if you could give me a standing October right as the leaves are falling.
Then we might need the videotape, but in the absence of it, we at least can get most of what she's saying for the next council members.
Okay, so
Right, I think they should be engaged because they were elected by the people to represent the people. And if they aren't engaged, then I get a sense that they're not communicating with me or understanding what my needs or concerns are.
Okay.
So I like to see them at community events.
So if you're looking at the role of government as a representative model and you're bringing to the table the voice of the people, not having this community engagement means that you can't possibly do your job, right? Because if nobody says,
Not the mindset.
yeah, if nobody says anything to you, you're not representing the people, they vote you and put you into place, and then it's your opinions, but they're stay disengaged and that their engagement stops at the polling place. Right, but if they're engaging with you and telling you what their views are, then you're more apt to communicate what the community is wanting. Now, you've still got to come to your conclusion at the end of the day about how you cast a vote, but certainly you could be more representative and do your job better if you just have that kind of input. Okay. Now, there's input to tribal leadership that informs tribal leadership's decision-making processes. But what about community engagement that goes short of that? What about, should the tribal official be involved in promoting community engagement when it just means letting people know what the tribal government is doing? Even if there's no two-way street that you're getting dialogue back to them, is there a role for tribal leaders in making sure that everything is transparent and open to the public?
Yes.
Okay, and what purpose does that serve?
Informed citizenry.
Okay, it tries to move people from this part of the spectrum over here with the others come for benefits to, I know all the things my tribal government are doing and I like those things or I don't like those things, but there's more knowledge about. And it might help reframe some of that psychological thought process about what a tribal government even is too.
And I think it helps for that component of people that you termed highly engaged, that at least if they're upset about something, they're coming from a more informed place.
Yeah,
Because a lot of the highly engaged,
it's speculation.
right,
Yeah, and that's something that, that I have seen happen with a couple of things my tribe's done lately. We had, and he would love that I'm talking about it at a thing like this, but we have an elder in the community who, when he was in the military, worked on those giant mainframe computers when something that could fit my iPhone was the size of this room, and so he was an early techie. And so when the internet first came out, he had a website that, you know, one of the first blogs I had ever seen in my life, but it was a local tribal elder running this. And he was on the highly engaged on the other end, the rancher, community elder rancher. And he would just dig stuff up on everybody and just put it on the blog, and it was out there, and there it was. But you talk about community engagement, you would go get a cup of coffee or go to a stomp dance or something, and everyone would say, have you seen this website? Everybody was on it, the whole community. And people got so engaged in it, for better or worse, that the tribal government blocked that website at work because people were spending hours on it. It was worse than Facebook. It was like a precursor. It was like a precursor to Facebook because he had everything on there. And what it also accomplished was that he was a fringe person in that he was a ranter, but he was an elder that, despite all his rants and some of them as nasty as you could possibly think of in tribal politics, he had a reputation for being confidential and discreet. And so his little thing was, a little birdie dropped some poo today, and here it is. And then he would just like, here's what's going on in this office at the, at the casino, or this is what's going on in this, or the court. Somebody filed it at 10 a.m. this morning, there was a lawsuit filed, and then he'd go to the court and get a copy of it and scan it in, and it would be up there on his website. And it was crazy how fast he got that information. But he was so discreet and so confidential that people higher up in and out of the government would be like, well, people might want to know this, let me slip a little something in here. And what happened as a result of it is that I think that that one guy single-handedly pushed our tribe toward better transparency because it was going to be his way or their way, okay? Now, that's one of the things when you think about putting this website up, what kind of information you might want to put out there. After he started these websites, and he had a little counter up there too that showed how many hits that website got, and some of them would be people logging on 50 times a day, but there were discrete users in the thousands that would be coming to his website. Well, after that thing got up and really running, and before Facebook or any of that, the tribe decided to, one of the big things was how much is tribal council spending on travel, and is it legitimate business, or are they having boondoggles all the time? And so he'd get somebody inside to tell him where somebody was going, and then people in those communities would be like, yeah, I saw him out to eat at this place and this place. And so he sort of outed people on the travel thing. So they passed a tribal law that said that all tribal council or official travel is on the website. And so, there's about a 6-month lag time. It eventually gets out there, but it made tribal council people think about, well, what are they going to think if 20 of us go to the Obama inauguration? Maybe only 5 of us should go, and those types of things. And on one hand, there was really unfair criticism about actual tribal business going on, and so you always run the risk of that. But I still think that the tribe putting the information out there, full transparency, and just being honest about it, it really cut down on the storm out here of the perceived what's going on with it. Yeah.
I agree that this is definitely something the tribal government can do, or should do, but the challenge that I see in this is tribal council sometimes spends months, maybe even a year or so or longer, getting educated about a particular issue, bringing them up to speed. They're sometimes dealing with very, very complicated, like a bond
Right.
financing or refinancing deal. And they have loads of experts coming in and teaching them and giving them this expertise. And when you distill that down to like the kind of sound bites that